Wyoming has a minimally regulated late fee framework, consistent with the state's overall light touch approach to landlord-tenant regulation. If you're a landlord or tenant in Wyoming, the state does not impose specific caps on late fees, does not mandate a grace period, and leaves most of the details to the lease agreement. The lease is your most important document when it comes to late fee enforceability. Let's start with the basics. Wyoming does not have a statute that caps the amount a landlord can charge as a late fee. There is no percentage limit, no dollar cap, and no statutory formula. The late fee amount is governed by the lease terms and general contract principles, specifically, the requirement that the fee be reasonable and not function as an unenforceable penalty. Wyoming also does not require a mandatory grace period before a late fee can be charged. If your lease says rent is due on the 1st and a late fee applies on the 2nd, that's enforceable. There is no state statute requiring a 3-day, 5-day, or any other grace period. However, most Wyoming landlords include a grace period of 3 to 5 days as standard practice. It's good business, even if it's not legally required. The key legal principle that governs late fees in Wyoming is reasonableness. Even without a specific statutory cap, Wyoming courts apply general contract law principles, and a late fee that is grossly disproportionate to the landlord's actual damages from the late payment can be challenged as an unenforceable penalty. The fee should bear a reasonable relationship to the landlord's actual costs, administrative time, additional accounting, the time value of money, and any other genuine expenses caused by the late payment. What's reasonable in Wyoming? There's no bright line test, but industry standards provide guidance. A flat fee of $50 to $75 or a percentage-based fee of 5 to 10% of the monthly rent is generally considered reasonable for Wyoming's market. A fee of 25% of the monthly rent would likely be challenged as excessive. The further the fee gets from the landlord's actual damages, the more vulnerable it becomes. Late fees in Wyoming should be clearly stated in the lease. The lease should specify the rent due date, any grace period, the exact late fee amount or percentage, when the fee begins to accrue, and whether additional fees apply for continued non-payment. Ambiguity works against the landlord. If the lease is unclear about the late fee terms, a court is likely to resolve the ambiguity in the tenant's favor. Wyoming does not have a specific statute addressing whether late fees can compound, meaning whether additional fees can be charged for each day or week that rent remains unpaid after the initial late fee. Compounding provisions are governed by the lease terms and general contract principles. A daily compounding fee that could theoretically exceed the monthly rent within a few weeks would likely be deemed unreasonable. A provision that adds a one-time additional fee after a longer period, such as an additional fee if rent is still unpaid after 15 or 30 days, is more defensible. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Wyoming is straightforward. When a landlord issues a notice for non-payment of rent, the question is whether unpaid late fees are treated as rent. In Wyoming, if the lease defines late fees as additional rent, which many leases do, then the unpaid late fees can be included in the total amount owed on the pay or quit notice. If the lease treats late fees as a separate charge rather than additional rent, the landlord may need to pursue the late fees through a separate claim rather than including them in the non-payment eviction. Best practice: define late fees as additional rent in your lease. This gives you the ability to include unpaid late fees in the total amount on any pay or quit notice and simplifies the eviction process if the tenant falls behind. Wyoming's eviction process is relatively fast. The landlord can file for eviction with just 3 days' notice for non-payment. This fast timeline means that chronic late payment situations escalate quickly, and the late fee provisions interact with the eviction timeline almost immediately. For tenants receiving housing choice voucher assistance, late fee provisions need special attention. If the housing authority's portion of the rent is delayed due to the authority's processing timeline, not the tenant's failure to pay their portion, charging the tenant a late fee for the authority's delay is problematic. The tenant cannot control the housing authority's payment schedule, and penalizing the tenant for the authority's administrative delay can create fair housing issues. If the tenant's portion is paid on time, focus your late fee enforcement on situations where the tenant actually fails to pay. Wyoming does not have specific statutory protections for military members regarding late fees, but the Federal Service Members Civil Relief Act provides protections that can interact with late payment situations. Active duty service members who experience financial hardship related to their service may have defenses against certain financial obligations. Landlords near F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne should be aware of SCRA implications. From a practical standpoint, Wyoming's rental market is small and concentrated. In Cheyenne, Casper, Laramie, Gillette, and other Wyoming communities, the landlord-tenant relationship tends to be more personal than in large metro markets. Most Wyoming landlords know their tenants, and late payment situations are often resolved through direct communication rather than formal enforcement. Having clear late fee provisions in your lease gives you the framework to enforce when needed, while allowing flexibility to work with tenants when circumstances warrant it. One best practice for Wyoming landlords: apply your late fee policy consistently across all tenants. Enforcing late fees against some tenants while waiving them for others creates fair housing risk. A tenant who is charged a late fee while a similarly situated tenant of a different race or national origin is given a pass has the basis for a discrimination complaint. Consistency is both legally required and practically important. Another best practice: document every late payment and every late fee charged. Keep records showing the rent due date, the date payment was actually received, the grace period, if any, the late fee amount, and when the tenant was notified. This documentation protects you if a tenant disputes the fee and demonstrates consistent enforcement across your portfolio. For the complete guide to Wyoming late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.